Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. It's nice to have you with us. We're an international group here, coming from many kind of places. Usually, we come from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, where it's the home of the Arlington Institute. And I'm John Petersen, who is associated for 30 plus years with this little organization. But today I'm in Mexico, south of Cancun, and so we're coming in from all kinds of different kind of places. Way up into the north and to the east is our friend Kingsley Dennis. Hi, Kingsley. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, John. Greetings from the U of K to everybody. Good to be back.
Well, thank you. We've got some latency built into the system, it seems, here that we're going to have to deal with today. And Penny Kelly. Hello, Penny from Michigan.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
And our old friend Gregg Braden, who's probably, I don't know where you are in the world. Greg, how are you today?
Hey, it's good to be with everyone. I'm coming to you from our studio here in cold, sunny Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Well, it's 85 degrees here in Mexico, and so it's a nice place to be. You don't have to walk for an hour, which I just did. But anyway, because they have a taxi strike here in Tulum. But anyway, it's nice to have you all, and I'm glad that we can get together no matter where we are today. And so the question of the day is, what are the best indications that you have that giant, extraordinary, positive, I might add, change is literally in the works today? I kind of alluded to wouldn't call it frustration, but the fact that almost every day that I've confronted with something that doesn't make sense, that people are starting, for instance, to get their arms all around the COVID business and building lists of that gives you kind of coherent pictures of what has happened. And when you go down that list, you keep asking yourself, why would anybody do that? Why would they do that? And in some cases, you say, oh, well, they're trying to make a lot of money and so on. But it's like you're destroying your underlying base, and it's very myopic and short-sighted. And it's really easy to get yourself into those kind of cul-de-sacs because there's so much going on in terms of food. They're blowing up and burning food processing plants and other kinds of things, and there's fires in the electrical distribution centers that are showing up all over the place, and it's like there's this concerted effort to bring down the system. And we can spend a lot of time talking about that and all of the indicators, but the other side of that equation is in the middle of all of that. What are the big issues and the big indicators that suggest that, if you will, as you've suggested, Kingsley, you need this, that it's an integral part of this transition into this from an old world to a new world? Well, what are the indications of the new world?
The crux for me is that the major indicator is that we're going through an evolutionary kind of shift, not just a social one or a cultural one or a civilizational one, but actually a species evolutionary shift. So if we look back in history, we've had these revolutions, the American, the French, even the English revolutions, and they change society, they change social structures, they change cultures, but they don't change the species. And that's the marker that we have these smaller kind of epochal shifts, which are cultural and civilizational. But at a certain point in the cycle, we get a species shift. And I think the cycle element is also very important here, because in between these momentous shifts, we have a view of history being kind of linear, like progress is going here to here to here. So, for example, our historical records say that, modern society began after the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago. Everything which happened from then, from the hunter-gatherer, agrarian, to the early settlers, everything has been a kind of advance. It's a progression. we are the peak of civilization so far. That's a linear mode. But if you go back to any kind of models before the Ice Age, they say, no, those civilizations didn't exist. They're mythological. Atlantis or, Göbekli Tepe, or any of the civilizations, they don't exist because they don't fit the timeline. Exactly. Our timeline is 12,000 years. So really, what their indicators are is that we're in a cyclical shift. Mm-hmm. The moment of transhumanism is arriving. It's as if we've arrived at a peak of materialism. And again, we've talked about disembodiment. This peak of materialism, we've got to a point of almost dematerialism. We're changing our energy systems from a kind of tangible, solid, gooey stuff to kind of ephemeral, non-tangible energy systems. Everything's gone from a mode, a material mode, to the next mode, a dematerial mode. And the human body too, the human species have got to a point where we can either go through a path of increased spiritualization of the human being, or a increased kind of solidification, materialism into the transhumanist path. So this splitting off of the species, for me, is one of the greatest indicators that this is a momentous cyclical change of what's happening on this planet.
There's so many perspectives from which we can answer this question. I've written extensively about the natural rhythms, the natural cycles that are converging, that are telling us that we are in this cyclic change, and those three primary cycles. We know that the climate cycles are converging right now, economic cycles and financial cycles, and cycles of human conflict. So any one of these cycles in and of themselves would be enough to turn civilization upside down. The degree of the change in the climate is impacting the way that people have chosen to live and where and how they've chosen to live. That is enough to change our society. The economic cycles that are right on schedule, following the rhythms that were established by economists in the late 1800s. We know that those cycles are happening right now. The cycles of human conflict surprise the UN because they believe that conflict is spontaneous. It just happens when it happens. And what the science clearly shows is that it is human conflict is linked to solar cycles, magnetic fields of the sun and the earth. And the bottom line, when those magnetic fields are low, we are more aggressive, less willing to cooperate to solve our problems. And we're at the lowest point in those solar cycles right now. And hence, I'm not surprised what we're seeing in the world. But in addition to these, John, the indicators, the powers that be are smart people. And I'm not saying they're the most intelligent when it comes to making decisions, but they know about these cycles. And so I think it's no accident that they are attempting to capitalize upon the chaos created by the cycles in the greatest experiments in social change, social engineering, financial engineering that we have seen in recorded human history. And so I think the question is, the only things that are breaking down are the unsustainable ways of thinking and living in the presence of these cycles. So what we're looking at right now is how we respond to the attempts to push 8 billion people into the ways that we respond to these natural rhythms. And the way that it's coming down right now, we look at the Great Reset, for example. It's very public. It's no secret. It's no conspiracy. I mean, it's out there. What they are proposing is so counter to natural human instincts, natural human intuition, and nature's laws. And the question is, will people wake up to become aware of the fact that we are in the place that we are right now?
Well, if the question is, what are the most persuasive indicators? I think that we have to have You have to take into account who's really watching, who's paying attention, whose consciousness is saying, hey, something's happening out there. So what I see and what I hear from a lot of people, is something's different and they know it. And I think that's the most persuasive indicator right there, is people saying they don't know what's different. They don't know how to characterize it, but they know something big is up. So I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I think are indicators that people could look at and interpret those a little bit differently, maybe. The second thing was the COVID problem that came up. That gave people a chance to stay or go. And a lot of people have chosen to leave. Then there's the war in Ukraine. That started, and that is going to mushroom. And people are, they're beginning to see the propaganda, and I think that's an important part of that piece. The propaganda has to be recognized. What's real, what's not real. Information has to be available, and people have to recognize the implications of that. And then we have the undercurrents, I'll call it, of central bank digital currencies. The economy is not doing well. Why would they shut down an entire economy for a flu bug? So when you do a little bit of research, what you discover is that the US is going to come out with central bank digital currency. Russia is planning a central bank digital ruble. China is planning a central bank digital yuan. India is planning. Brazil has that in the works. All of the big financial systems are saying we're going digital. When you start to value something that isn't material, physical, we're going back to kind of what Kingsley said, then you are not valuing the material realm. And there's been a huge energetic shift that says we don't have to have the material world in order to have something of value. So the financial thing is a huge red flag. And then the last thing is the technology. I think we've reached the peak of what we can do with technology, the way we're trying to use it. And we have to make the shift in consciousness to a different kind of technological organization. And I'm not talking about transhuman. I'm talking about the choice between, do we serve the technology or does the technology serve us? And I have to agree with Kingsley and Gregg. We are being pushed to evolve.
And essentially, I think the really positive things are the byproducts or the flip side of the negative things, if you will. What that's doing is raising awareness. And of course, this whole thing, this whole transition is about expanding awareness. You can talk about that in terms of consciousness terms. You can talk about that in kind of frequencies, which I think we need to do. But nevertheless, it is the fragmentation of the old system that allows the light to shine through, if you will, to illuminate the emergent kind of new world. And the same thing is happening in both food and energy, as I've said before, that the notion that you can't, I've been to a couple of grocery stores lately, getting ready for this trip to come to Mexico. And my, oh my, the things that you would expect to be there aren't there necessarily. I mean, and then it's a mind shift that you kind of have to go through that says, wait a second, the usual situation is not necessarily going to be here when I go now. And so I need to think differently about that. And so what you start to do is line up these kinds of things like energy problems and so on. There are some places we have a wonderful woman who works for us that is in Zimbabwe, and and I mean, Zimbabwe is not the world's best example for energy security and stability and predictability, but nevertheless, she goes days at a time without any electrical power, and that's kind of so you got to find out when in the middle of the night the power is going to be on for 2 hours, and how you get to that. And so there are these kind of things that are called kind of lining up. There's more and more people who are becoming aware, as has been suggested by Kingsley, of the climate, and that it's related in some kind of way to the sun, and we're going into a different place in the galaxy, and the energies are different. And all of those come together. And then when you do talk about the kind of things that Penny was talking about in terms of the fact that there's so much that's going on that is antithetical to the essence of what we all think of as humans and humanness and human beings. It's just it's raising up to the point where you look at this whole thing and say, wait a second, there's something really giant and big that's going on.
The magnetic field around the Earth is our protection from the effects of the sun, the radiation of the sun. That has dropped 25% and is now dropping, I forget if it's 2% a year. That's huge. If we're already down 25%, that means 25% more cosmic rays are coming through. Cosmic rays change DNA, period. So that radiation is energy. DNA responds to energy.
We can only transcend our limitations through our humanness, and our DNA is the foundation for that. When we are kept in fear of the chaos, of the uncertainty of our world, that fear severs us. It limits our ability to access our divinity. And when our DNA is replaced with polymers and chemicals and sensors and AI and synthetics, we no longer have access to our own divinity.
And we have to split from the frequencies that are previous to us, anterior, because they're no longer suitable for where we're going. And when we get to the end of this cycle, it's like we're going towards a vortex. And when you get towards a vortex, it starts spinning. Yeah. And it's also almost like a centrifuge. A centrifuge where you put in a test tube and the liquid and the solid start to separate. I think we're going through a frequency vibrational centrifugal moment. And we can stick with the denser parts, or we can separate with the finer parts. And I think there's a lot of, there's some kind of, as we talked about, some kind of social management, social manipulation, trying to get people into the denser part, because that's easier to control. It's tangible. It's already in this domain. But the finer parts, which are going off, you can't control them because they're a completely different realm. This is the divine realm that you mentioned, Greg. It's a realm where we need to go to. And the people or the agencies that have control right now can't control where we're going to. So they don't want us to go there.
We're at a point, a choice point that I think is critical.
One of the things that we haven't talked about was this whole issue of disclosure and engagement with the alien forces, entities. This is an extraordinary idea, an extraordinary event. Everything suggests that in terms of the kind of organization and the effort and the resources and the awareness of the possibility of life, and not the possibility, but almost the certainty of alien life, and the possibility of kind of transitioning into a human alien engagement, but active, open engagement. This is an amazingly big kind of idea that has extraordinary kind of implications. And so for me, that is a really important kind of component of this whole transition business, because it's almost like this is all being orchestrated on a terrestrial level. It's almost being orchestrated in a way that is baffling and impressive.
Oh, Greg, I have to say, when you said that wonderful line, the cosmos is a big place. That must be the biggest understatement ever since Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, when Michael Palin said, "Oh God, you're so big."
So thank you all very much for all of your comments and all the extraordinary kind of interesting kind of issues that you've raised. This comes to you, of course, we do every 2 weeks in Quartet from the Arlington Institute. And we're located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town just down the road from Baltimore and Washington. And we hope that you'll come and visit us sometime. The best time to do that is during our transition talks, which we do every month, where we bring a speaker in from somewhere in the world. Gregg and Penny will be with us, in the coming months, as will David Martin and any of a number of other very fascinating kind of individuals who all are focused on this whole issue of preparing for and understanding and making sense out of this amazing kind of time that we're living in right now. And so you'll find a whole lot more at arlingtoninstitute.org. We've got a lot of things in the work that we do back here. So thanks again, and come back and be with us on Quartet here in another couple of weeks. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay well.
Thank you, everybody.